Welcome to JAMA AI Conversations. I'm Roy Perlis, Editor-in-Chief of JAMA AI, and I'm pleased to welcome today's guest, Dr. Michael Howell, Chief Clinical Officer at Google. Today we'll be getting his perspective on safe deployment of AI in healthcare, topics that I know he's been thinking a lot about. We'll try to go deeper than the usual, we should be careful stuff, because of course the devil is in the details. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Roy.
Just yesterday, in prepping for our show, I was reading about another company's language model, which gladly provided tips on satanic rituals, including bloodletting. I'm wondering, is this just going to be par for the course, where every few weeks or months, these kinds of frontier models remind us of the risks?
Well, I think the interesting thing about these models is, there are many interesting things about these models, but one of them is how rapidly they get better in so many aspects, right? If we think back to our early experiences with these compared to today, they've really changed a lot. One of the other things that I didn't understand until I came to Google is how creative human beings are. I know that sounds silly, but if you look at what people come to Google search and search for, it turns out that 15% of what gets typed into the search box every day has never been typed in before. It's the first time that it's ever been typed in. That makes it a really interesting space to think about with the intersection of things that by definition can't be in your training data because people are saying them literally for the first time in human history. And how do you give safe responses to that? Obviously, there are many things that are way across the line that you don't want your models to say. And it's an ongoing issue with a huge amount of safety research around it.
That's an amazing statistic in terms of the proportion of things that they've never seen before.
Yeah, I didn't believe it when people told me. And then I was like, well, wait a minute. Like, let's just take English, right? 52 characters if you just take caps and, little letters. And like 52 squared, I can kind of do that in my head, 52 to the third. When you get to like 52 to the 10th or to the 20th or the 30th, which is like not that long of a question from people, you get into these numbers that are unbelievably large. And so the takeaway from that, I think, is language and human thought is a very high dimensional space that I think we sometimes underappreciate the complexity of it.
So one of the things I hear from colleagues who have done some of that safety and alignment work and worked on guardrails is that they see a major trade-off, that these models without the guardrails do far better, perform at a higher level. But of course, that's not exactly realistic. We can't have these models loose in the world without guardrails. Is it your sense that we're getting better? Are we getting better at figuring out what the guardrails need to be? Or are we always going to be sort of running in place as far as that goes?
When we look at it over time, we invest a lot in research and publications on these models. And if you go back to one of our earlier ones called MedPalm, we invested in having a whole bunch of physicians rate a whole bunch of answers from the models. And yes, we've seen improvement over time, I think is the short answer in that. But there are two pieces about that I think we forget. And one of them is that we don't think about the baseline rate of errors from physicians. So if you went to your EHR and you pulled 1,000 random notes out of there, how many do you think would have things that aren't true in them? I practiced in the ICU for a long time, and the number of times you would see a note that said continue care of the right toe, and it's post-op day 3 from a BKA is a lot for that. And in the research that our teams did, which is an artificial construct, but is people ask questions, model gives answers. People ask questions, physician writes answers. And so we have a physician-written answer and a model-written answer to a question. We give that to other physicians blinded, and then they judge it based on accuracy, likelihood to hurt the patient, other things like that. We typically saw higher rates in physicians than in the model. And that's an important thing for us all to think about as we work to evaluate these.
I'm really glad you went there. I was thinking about that this morning, that chart myths long predate language models, right? And patients acquire new diagnoses, they lose diagnoses, and obviously we're striving for perfection, but it's not as though charts were perfect before language models appeared on the scene. You alluded a little bit earlier to the variety of searches that you have to contend with. For many patients and families and doctors at this point, Google is de facto the go-to for medical information. And it's probably better for me to say it than for you to say it. But in a prior era, which is to say 2 years ago, I'd go to Google and do a health search and it would point me to health sites. But now I'm just as likely to get a summary from one of these models from Gemini, which I think puts you in kind of a weird position as probably the single biggest resource for medical knowledge. When I think about just the proportion of people out there on any given day who are looking for an answer, they're getting it from you. How do you think about that responsibility? How do you think about that as someone responsible for, in the end, what the model spits back or what the site spits back?
It's probably worth saying that the majority of my career, I worked on patient safety and healthcare quality in healthcare systems. That's the academic tradition I was raised in, and that was a huge amount of my work. And so that is the orientation that I bring to Google. Having taken care of patients who've been hurt by medical errors and having seen a huge number of miraculous saves by the healthcare system over time. It's a responsibility that we take very seriously. I'm often asked, why is Google in health? And the simple answer is that people come and ask us for information and for help in understanding what's going on in their lives. And that's true across the areas of their lives, but it's also true in health. And so we get on search several 100 million questions a day that are related to health in some way. And it's a responsibility that the company takes very seriously, that I take very seriously. And we've done a huge amount of work on that over time. If people want to see probably the most detailed information about how we think about it, we share this thing called the Search Rater Guidelines, which is, 170 pages of what do we actually look for in high quality websites. The question that you asked, though, is we've gone from an era when people want information as 10 blue links to they want information in a different way. And that's the moment that we're all in now. And so we made a decision very early on in search, not just to give the text blob, but to build in references from the very beginning. And if you look at AI overviews, which is the summary that comes on top of Google search, it helps link out to other sites. These tend to be high quality sites. It's not just the text that our model provides. And that's an important decision that the company made upfront.
So the links are there, but do people click them? Because my sense is in reading other things that a lot of people don't. A lot of people take the answer that they get and they see that there are links there, but they don't necessarily follow them.
What we've seen is a couple of things with this. So first is we've seen that people like it. The second is we've seen that people ask more questions in areas where they get these summaries, which is not in a way where they didn't get the answer. They have more questions. They realize they can get more answers. And that what we also see is that people click on a wider diversity of links than they did when it was just the 10 blue links. And so people are going to different websites across the ecosystem in a way that adds diversity to what they end up seeing. And I think that there's a good reason for that. That if you ask a question of, what is pneumonia, right? I'm a pulmonary and critical care doc. Okay, that's going to be on one web page. Great. But often what happens is that your question isn't on a single web page. Well, tell me about pneumonia for people with this and people with that and people with the other thing and people with the fourth thing. And what you used to have to do is go and click into many different sites to get the information to answer your question. And now you're like, oh, well, this part seems really important. Let me go find out about that and make sure that the model got it right. It's definitely evolving over time.
So I have to ask one sort of inside baseball question wearing my JAMA hat, which is, what do you think happens to medical journals? How do you think they evolve when more of their content is sort of summarized and presented up front rather than people going to the journals. What do I tell my boss about why she shouldn't be worried?
I know that journals are thinking hard about this, and I've seen that JAMA signed an agreement with Open Evidence to think about how to get the right information to more people through news surfaces. And my expectation is that publishers and medical journals will continue to evolve how to think about that over time. I think the last time that we saw something like this, there's sort of two moments I've been thinking about. One is we went from a place where people only ask questions on the web on their desktop computer or laptop computer to everyone had the internet in their pocket. And there was a lot of adaptation required there because the way you show information is remarkably different on a phone than on a 17-inch screen. And before that, what did we have before the internet, right? Before NCSA Mosaic in the early 90s, we had Gopher. I think it was Gopher. And we had some web browsers that didn't show images, right? And NCSA Mosaic showed inline images, and the entire web changed in response to that. And so I think we're in one of those moments of the people's approach to getting information is in the process of evolving. And I'm not smart enough to know what the end state will be.
That makes sense. And I think it points to the fact that we're going to need to experiment to figure out how people want to get these kinds of data and how we collect it and package it in a way that is most useful. Speaking of experiments, I know that there's been discussion of this principle of try first in AI, and encouragement to try first across AI, but including in healthcare. And as a scientist, I'm all for experiments, as I think I just indicated. But as a doc, and given your background as well, we're trained to be very cautious and very systematic and very step by step. And you sort of have a foot in both worlds, right? You have a foot in the medical world where we're very cautious, but you also have more than a foot at Google where I saw the dinosaur skeleton outside. I mean, you guys are trying to move fast. How do you reconcile that? The push to try stuff and move quickly and the push to say, well, hang on, we got to slow down and be careful.
So one of the least known things about Google is how much in health and healthcare we focus on evidence and peer-reviewed publications. So if you look at our website, which is weirdly health.google, and click around, you'll find a list of our publications on AI and health. And it's north of 150, probably closing on 200 at this time, including several in JAMA. And if you look at groups that aggregate the impact of companies on the high quality peer-reviewed literature, you'll see that it's not just pharmaceutical companies or medical device companies that are contributing to literature. Google is in the same scope of impact on the peer-reviewed literature. So the first thing is that we test a lot, and I'm often asked why. And it's not that editors at JAMA and New England Journal and Nature move at the speed to which Google is accustomed, but it is because this process helps us test and learn as we go along in a way that adds to the body of science and in a way that helps us understand what's going on. The second thing is that not everything we do has a paper with it, right? And that as we are testing and learning, let's leave it outside the health space for a minute, right? Let's imagine that we are asking the question of people want to look up things on their refrigerator or their microwave.
Which I think they don't, by the way. Just to be clear, I don't want to look things up on my refrigerator.
Yeah. So Google is about helping people find the best information that they need at the moment that they're at with the least work and least cognitive burden. And so, of course, we will learn as we go along because otherwise we won't know if we're helping our users.
Speaking of learning as we go along, I wanted to ask you, we have a lot of early career physicians, scientists, coders, engineers, folks who are sort of just starting out who listen to the podcast and want to work at this sort of AI health interface. What do you think is the path now? Who are the people who we need to do the sort of work that you're leading? Who's Google going to be hiring, or who will health systems be hiring 5 or 10 years from now in these kinds of roles?
I think about my own career sometimes, and in some ways I feel like it's career development by Brownian motion. of learning skills that seemed general purpose and important, and they turn out to fit together well. In many ways, I think residency is training in general purpose problem solving. And so the first thing that I would say is that the job of a doctor is to be a good doctor. And so don't think that to end up working at Google, you need to go do other things now. Technology companies hire people who know what they're doing. Right? We can hire engineers, but people who know what they're doing and taking care of sick people and helping people stay well, really important. The second is to realize that we're in a moment of change, of very important technical change, and that playing around with these things, we have a model that can see and hear the world around you with like these continuous video and audio called Gemini Live, and playing with it and walking around your house and looking at photos and like asking it questions helps you understand what the future will be like. And then the third thing is that a bunch of my career before Google was about helping design and create a health system that improved quality, reduced harm, had better experience. And what I've learned is that those things that we did a whole lot of work, reducing cardiac arrest, improving cancer screening rates, things like that. What those things turn out to be is product. So Google talks about product. Product is an idea, some math, some implementation that people use to change something in their world. Well, getting experience of doing things that is not solely in the one-to-one encounter is helpful as you think about what could translate into tech.
So I want to end with a question about the translation part of things, which is fast forward 10 years from now, and we're walking through a hospital, maybe we're walking through my hospital. How do we know if you succeeded? How do we know if Google succeeded at the things you want to do? Does it look different, or are there other ways we'll know?
So we're a part of the ecosystem, and we're a partner to hospitals and doctors' offices and device companies. And we believe that very intentionally. And so if you're walking around a hospital, number one is I hope more people are at home healthy than in the hospital. Number two is I hope that patients and families are more empowered with better knowledge. And number three is I hope that doctors and nurses and other clinicians are supported by AI. And I mean that in a sort of particular way of any of us who practiced for any length of time have had a nurse tap you on the shoulder and go, "Doc, are you sure you want to do that?" And the answer to that is no. Right? No.
No, I don't.
No. And, after you've been in practice for a decade or whatever, you have like somebody who you carry around in your head to be like, "Hey, doc, you're sure you want to do that?" And I think that there's a chance for AI to help with things like that of, "Hey, doc, did you think about this?" And that convergence of more empowered, better informed patients and clinicians who are supported by AI, that's the future that I hope for.
And I think that's a great place for us to stop. Michael, thanks again for talking with us today. To our listeners, if you want to read more of Dr. Howell's work, you can find a link to some of his past articles in the episode description. To follow this and other JAMA Network podcasts, visit us online at jamanetworkaudio.com or search for JAMA Network wherever you get your podcasts. This episode was produced by Shelley Steffens at the JAMA Network. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
This content is protected by copyright by the American Medical Association with all rights reserved, including those for text and data mining, AI training, and similar technologies.